Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Gears and talk about things from the Alabama perspective now. And by the way, let me say one thing really quick. If you're watching on YouTube, this happens a lot. We break off the show in clips. So if you're a Texas fan and you hear me talking about Bama for the next 7-8 minutes and you say, why don't you talk about my team? Well, guess what? I did just talk about your team for like 20 minutes. So find that clip. Texas, as I said a moment ago, was the deserving team, deserved to win. They were the team that should have been victorious. Credit to Texas. I just talked about them. But I do want to switch gears to the Alabama perspective because, listen, Alabama, this is how you know you're something special as a program. When you lose, it's still code red. It's still the worst thing ever. And when you lose, conversations like, is the dynasty dead, continue to pop up. And so I want to talk about this game from the Alabama perspective. But I'm going to do this weird thing where I'm not going to be negative. I'm not going to be the sky is falling. I'm not going to be this is the worst program in the history of football. But what I will say about Alabama, I do believe that they have one big fundamental question that they have to ask themselves right now to save this season. And I think they got to make this decision quick. Now, in terms of the game itself, again, Texas was the deserving victor. Texas was the better team. Texas was the one that should have had their moment at the beginning of this show, which we just talked about. At the same time, I know that the stat sheet said that Texas was significantly better. But if you watch this game, I don't buy it at all. Remember, it's easy to forget this now. And this isn't taking anything away from Texas. They made the plays late. Alabama didn't. We all understand that Alabama had the lead in the fourth quarter, right? Like we understand that at one point it was 16-13 in the fourth quarter, Alabama led. From there, Quinn Ewers made throws. From there was a bad interception from Jalen Milroe. And from there, Texas got their deserved victory. But when I look at this game, everybody wants to make this an indictment of, oh my God, it's last year all over again. The defense is terrible. The run game is terrible. Now we don't have Bryce Young to bail us out. By the way, that was kind of my thought in the middle of the game. But as I sat back and thought about it, I don't think that's the case at all. First of all, from the defense's perspective, this is the best pass offense that they will see all year until probably a potential college football playoff. I don't buy Joe Milton in Tennessee. I don't buy Jaden Daniels, and I don't buy him the way I buy Quinn Ewers and the receivers that Texas has. And so when I look at this game, I thought Alabama's defense actually held up pretty well. This wasn't last year when Tennessee scored like 28 points in the first quarter. This wasn't last year when Quinn Ewers came out and was throwing darts from the first moment of that game and Texas was in complete control until he got hurt. This was a game where Texas was good early, but they had 13 points at the half. They were scoreless in the third quarter, and it wasn't until late until they pulled away. The defense did their job for 3+ quarters until they were on the field for simply too long. That's indisputable. By the way, you want to know how good the defense was or how, let me put it this way. If you think that the Alabama defense was fundamentally just way worse than Texas's defense, here's a stat for you. Texas finished the game 7 of 18 on third down. It's about 38%. It means that Alabama got them off the field. I'm not great at math, but that'd be about 62% of the time on third down. Alabama was 5 of 14, 33%. So they were basically the same team on third down in that game. The defense put Alabama in position to have a lead. The defense was good on third down. I thought the defense did their job. Let me also defend this. Let me defend the offensive line for Alabama as well. I think it's easy to say, oh, they couldn't run the ball. They were terrible. And the stat sheet backs it up. 3 yards per carry, 107 yards rushing on 35 carries. 44 of those yards, by the way, came from Alabama's quarterback, Jalen Milroe. But as I watched that game, I didn't think that Alabama couldn't run the ball because they're incapable and the offensive line is terrible. I thought Alabama couldn't run the ball because Texas was loading the box, because Texas was not scared by the threat of the pass, because Texas was scared of Jalen Milroe's legs, not Jalen Milroe's arm. Now, to Jalen Milroe's credit, he made some big throws late, but it was clear the game plan was stop the run, stop Jalen Milroe on the ground. We'll take our chances in pass coverage. So was the offense that bad? And was the offensive line that bad? Or was it a situation where the question, I guess, would become, was Alabama's offensive line incapable of run blocking? Or was it a situation where Texas did not respect the pass and that made life difficult for the Alabama offensive line? Lastly, I saw this too. It's like, oh, I mean, the dynasty's dead because NIL and transfer portal has changed everything. I don't buy that at all. Now, part of it is, yes, I do think USC finally got their right coach. I do think Texas apparently has its coach. Georgia obviously has its coach with Kirby Smart. But stop with the dynasty is dead stuff. You understand that Alabama, by the way, had maybe one of the greatest recruiting classes in the history of high school football last year. You understand the year before, when Texas A&M had one of the greatest classes in the history of high school football, Alabama actually had a higher star rating average. You understand in 2021, a lot of the guys that were on the field on Saturday was the number one rated class in the country. And I understand that some of those guys left, but don't tell me it's about talent. Alabama still has as much talent as anybody in college football. Now, to the credit of Texas, LSU, some others, they've elevated the talent, but for Alabama, it's not a talent issue. For me, this is what I truly believe, and this is what I think Alabama has to do to save their season. They have to decide what they want their offense to be and who they want running that offense. And what I mean by that is this. You watch that game. So even backtrack. What have we heard out of Alabama for the last 9 months? Since Bill O'Brien left as the offensive coordinator, since Pete Golding left as the defensive coordinator, we have heard they are recommitting to power football, to the run game, to physicality, to toughness. And I think that's great. I think they should. They have the bodies. They have the dudes. You don't need Bryce Young. You don't need whoever, Tua. Recommit to the run. That's fine. Here's my problem, though. Jalen Milroe isn't the guy to do that. Jalen Milroe, as I just said, is best in the open field. He's best making plays with his legs. He's elite. Now, he can throw a great deep ball, but I don't think he's good in the short and intermediate passing game. And I don't mean to nerd out on X's and O's. I'm not an X's and O's guy, but I think this is important for this moment. I do think if you're Alabama, this is what you have to decide. Do we want to build an offense around Jalen Milroe, a guy whose best attributes are clearly his legs and the deep ball? Or are we going to stick with what we've said? Are we going to stick with ground and pound power football? Because if that's what they're going to do, Jalen Milroe is not the right guy for that system. And so because of it, I will go back and I will say what I truly believe on this topic. Alabama has a decision to make. Right now, Jalen Milroe in that offense is a square peg in a round hole. But defenses do not fear the pass game, certainly in the short and intermediate. And I don't think you can scheme around that. And so you have to decide, are we going to build an offense around him, or are we going to go with Tyler Buckner, the transfer from Notre Dame? This is a kid. He's certainly limited athletically. He's not great, but he's good in the short passing game. He can hand the ball off. There will be more balance in the run-pass game, which is what you told us you were going to do from the beginning. And so I think Alabama has a big decision to make at quarterback. And lastly, let me say this. I actually thought the best take I saw on this was from Barrett Sallee, buddy of mine from CBS Sports. Like, he said point blank, he said, Nick Saban, I do think, miscalculated one big thing. This is Barrett's take, not mine, but I agree with him. He said Nick Saban should have been more aggressive in the quarterback transfer portal in the winter. Remember, there's a winter transfer portal and a spring transfer portal, okay? And in the winter, there were a lot of good quarterbacks in there. Sam Hartman, who's now at Notre Dame, Brennan Armstrong, who's now at NC State, Spencer Sanders and Walker Howard, who are both at Ole Miss. There were a lot of really good quarterbacks in the portal at that time. Grayson McCall, who ended up going back to Coastal Carolina. Nick Saban kind of pumped the brakes. Nick Saban kind of was happy with what he had. And then spring football happened, and he was like, I don't know if we got the guy here. And then from there, they started to scramble to try and find a guy. In my opinion, Nick Saban should have been more aggressive early in that transfer portal. I agree with what Barrett said, but now he's in a situation where he's got to figure some things out. So we will see what happens with Alabama. I don't think things are over, especially if you've seen LSU, if you saw A&M against Miami, which we're going to talk about in a minute, if you've seen whoever. There are wins to be had on this schedule. There is no Georgia on this schedule. Texas is actually probably the best team on the schedule, but you got to figure out what you're doing at quarterback. It's clear that you're trying to make Milroe into somebody that he's not. Do you want to let Jalen Milroe cook, or do you want to find another alternative? That is the question for Bama.